us understand better
the
background of that.
I don't know. I'm not a member of that. I'll give it a try.
The first one, the first one, it's about the one-child policy, because China has been implementing this for nearly three decades already. As an NPC deputy from Guangdong province, basically what the deputy is saying, it's time for us to make adjustments. The one-child policy has had its role, and it's been extremely important in China and China's development, but it's time to reconsider whether we should stick to that policy or whether it's time to make some changes.
Well, I know in recent years, I think there was a legislature that came down saying, that if you're two people, if you get married and you're each from a one-child family, you can have two children. And I know it wasn't always that case, but recently I don't know.
Maybe not the national policy. No.
Not a national policy.
For that one, I mean, whether it's one child, and then that means you can have two. I don't know. Maybe it's been practiced in some parts of the country.
Well, I've from many people that are single children were born after the one-child policy was implemented, so they're roughly my age, and a lot of them are having children these days. A lot of them are having a very hot debate as to whether or not they want to have two children or just stick to one child.
Sometimes when you make a policy at the time, you're thinking of what happened today. For example, China is facing the pressure of too many people floating around, not enough supply, not enough natural resources to take care of them. So decide, let's try the one-child policy. When that happens, what's happened years down the road is several things. Number one, those single family with a single child is totally spoiled. Very much so. Two sets of grandparents, two sets of whatever. Second, they do not know how to work independently by themselves. Everything is taken care of at home and going outside. Nevertheless, when they go out, they're facing a different world. They're not prepared for that. So this adjustment is essential. In Taiwan, for example, now to encourage to have the second child in Taiwan, they gave them extra bonus. At the time of birth, how much money, and every year and so on. So China is facing the similar situation.
And one of the reasons actually given out by that deputy is the control has been more effective actually in big cities, because the punishment could be severe if you break that law. Well, in the countryside, because they don't have a job and they don't have a company, and basically even if you want to impose that punishment, you don't really have a place to implement that.
It's much harder to control.
Basically, what is happening these days, the one-child policy is more true in the cities rather than in the countryside. Well, these people in the cities, they have, the better resources, they have better education ability for the next generation, while people in the countryside might be in the disadvantaged, status. And that's one of the reasons, given by that deputy. Since this is happening already, why don't you just give the people in the cities a chance for a second child when they want to? There are also some social implications about this one-child policy, because, as they grow up alone, they don't even have a playmates,
And there's actually another, it's culturally specific, but it's just as serious an issue, in my opinion anyway, and that is, the friends that I have that are single children, they're really starting to worry about what they're going to do when their parents retire. And they're the only one in their family, because China has a tradition of filial piety, and the younger generation looking after the older generation, all of that burden of looking after two parents, a mother and father, is going to fall on their single shoulders, and how difficult that will be. Whereas, before, if you have brothers and sisters, everyone sort of takes a piece of that responsibility. And now, it's on one set of shoulders.
Not only that, nowadays, because of the advancement of technology and medical treatment, people are living much longer. So they don't just disappear at age of 70, maybe went up to 90, whatever. So therefore, a lot of people have already retired, drawing from the pensions. They depend on the younger ones working to put the money in. Then this base becomes smaller and smaller. and the top become larger and larger, so become a tremendous financial burden, as you have in the States too.
Well, since, I mean, all these issues are being considered and the new proposal, new recommendation has been raised, hopefully, you know, some changes will happen soon.
I'm sure we'll see them. I'm sure we'll see them.
Yeah, we'll see what happens next year. Well, let's just move on to the next recommendation or next proposal, and this is more about the estate tax, because we don't have the estate tax yet, not in China, but it is raised by one of the CPPCC members, saying, I mean, to implement this estate tax policy is basically to try to shorten the gap between the rich and the poor. You know,
I think it serves many other functions. For example, if you have done your very best, make yourself a millionaire in a process, at the time that you left the world, you know, you like to have your accumulated wealth to make more contribution to the people still on Earth. In that case, you donate money to museums or to the university and so on. Then the government also take a good cut of that to decide what to do. But in China, it's a little more troublesome because sometimes the rich ones do not have the wealth well registered. You don't trace them down to know exactly how much they have. Secondly, they may give to the kids and so on. Like United States, it's very, very restricted regulations.
I was going to say,
how much money give to the kids there? You can't just do it last minute.
Yeah, estate tax is very high in the United States. I think almost like at 50%
it's
or something.
accumulative.
Yeah.
After $500,000 or 10 million, whatever, yeah, they take more than half away from you.
Yeah.
So this practice has to be looked into very seriously because China now, we have how many billionaires now on the?
I think the majority of, or you know, China has the most billionaires as a country than any other country in the world.
The next to the United States, I think.
There's something like that. Yeah. It's up there now.
I guess it's also meant to encourage the young people, the young generation, to work to find their own way to their wealth. Okay, let's just take a short break. When we come back, more proposals from the CPPCC and also NPC members and deputies. We'll be right back.
Every cent counts. For over 40 years, the Community Chest has given 100% of your donation to the needy, right here in Hong Kong.
And welcome back to Crossover. We've been talking about this new proposals, new recommendations being raised by the members or deputies of the CPPCC and NPC in this political season in China. But it seems, Charlotte, you have a question about the names.
Well, I just, you know, for people who aren't that familiar with Chinese political structure,
Right.
CPPCC might seem like, you know, what is the CPPCC?
Upper house. Well, CPPCC stands for CPPCC.
It's a tongue twister. But
Are you right?
CPPCC stands for the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference.
And then NPC is the National People's Congress. So
Simply,
that's what we're talking about.
And once again, Gregory, the roles of the two bodies.
Well, of course, the first one is to hopefully to represent the wishes, the wisdom of the people in the ranks. They're not government officials as such, but they're concerned about their own future, concerned about the future of the nation. So to make the best recommendation there is.
This is the CPPCC.
CPPCC.
And they're not elected, they're appointed.
Appointed.
It's just like the upper house, I guess, in the
almost
UK.
like that. They sent their recommendation to the NPC for final resolution, or sent to the government to say council to become law or administrative practices. So they're in a position to make suggestions. They don't push the button toward the end.
Yeah.
It cuts up to the government, NPC plus the city council to get the job done. That's the second part of it.
Yeah,
So there
and
we
the
are.
NPC deputies are the elected members of that body, and they are the legislature.
Correct.
And they meet annually in Beijing.
And that's it in a nutshell.
They have about 2,000 or so, I understand.
Yeah, over 2,000.
Over 2,000 or so, yeah.
Let's just move on to the new recommendations or new proposals. And this one, it's about, well, basically it has a lot to do with your area, smoking control.
Here we go.
Here we go. It's a new proposal actually being raised by the CPPCC member. Well, it's a joint proposal being raised by over nearly 300 members of CPPCC, because China has already participated in the, what is it called again? The Smoke Control Treaty?
FCTC.
Yeah.
FCTC.
Headed by the World Health Organization.
Correct.
This is
WHO.
already the year number 6. And the new proposal basically is about how do we fulfill our duties of that treaty.
Correct. China today is facing an extremely serious situation in tobacco control because even though China signed the FCTC 5 years ago, now this year it's supposed to deliver, but it's almost nothing. There are 5 things suggested. I mentioned very briefly. Number 1 is to have a national law or tobacco control act passed to ensure that to ban public smoking, to ban smoking altogether in public locations. We don't have one. The second one is to offer assistance to smokers to help them quit smoking. You have to designate smoking as a disease. It's actually a chronic disease detected by the smoking linkage to tobacco dependency. That is not a disease, therefore you cannot pay expenses. If you go to treatment, you have to spend money from your pocket. And then that's very difficult. Then we do not have clinical smoking cessation services set up in China to help them once they get there, to have no place to go. The next one is to have graphic designs on the package of cigarettes. The idea is to discourage people from buying the cigarettes, from sending cigarettes to others as a gift, but that is not happening in China. Another thing happening is that we should ban the illegal advertisement and promotion of tobacco companies. They do that, make contribution to a school and say it's a school donated by tobacco companies, and also sponsor certain sports activities. These actions, in a way, encourage people to smoke more and discourage people from cutting them down. The next one is they have to raise tobacco taxes.
It's extremely difficult, especially in China, because the smoking habit, it seems so strong with Chinese people.
I think that's one of those things, though. I mean, I'm, again, not an expert, but it's one of those things where it seems difficult until you actually do something about it. Mentioning, graphic designs on cigarette cartons or cigarette packs. I remember France a few years ago had a huge campaign with that, and the photos were very graphic that they had on in their advertising and marketing for cutting smoking or discouraging smoking. So, I think it's hard until you just make up your mind to do something about it.
We have a smoking population of 350 million in China.
Then 540 under the distress of secondhand smoke.
Wow.
So actually 3/4 of the people in China
suffering.
every day suffering in one way or another. I think one thing that I'm very much concerned is about the smoking habits of the peasants, of the people in the countries, in the rural areas. Because nowadays we always talk about it's very difficult for a peasant to get sick, the disease taken care of once they have a heart attack or something like that. But we should look at the roots of the problem, because smoking is one of the most important reasons for them to get sick. Heart attack or lung cancer or whatever. So that force, that evil force has to be stopped. But we don't have any program at this point going on actively to help peasants quit smoking, and that should be done.
Yeah, but I mean, it's a government job, but at the same time, I guess this is the individual's job to change maybe our lifestyle, our habits sometimes, because we even have the saying, one cigarette after meal is like you're feeling you're in heaven. All these sayings are, to some extent, encouraging people to have a little taste of that. What about a smoking police? The idea of smoking police to supervise the implementation of that?
That is one of the problems China is facing today. For example, once you have a regulation, for example, if you get caught in a public location smoking, you're supposed to fine, say, $200. Who's going to do that?
Exactly. Who is going to enforce that law?
Yeah. For example, for many years now in Beijing, you're not supposed to smoke in public transportation vehicles, including taxis. But as you know, before the Olympic Games 2 years ago, a lot of passengers smoke in automobiles. Nobody ever stepped.
So what are they going to do with them?
That's right.
Not the taxi driver.
They cannot. If they do that, they're in big trouble because they will be turning and say, oh, "Wait a minute, he's impolite to me," or making a false accusation. So,
but well, I have to say, and I mean, there are some positive development, though. I mean, maybe not that quick enough, but you know, in some restaurants, at least they have that smoking area and non-smoking area.
Actually, many more restaurants now have smoking areas and non-smoking areas, which at least is it's a step in some right direction.
Exactly.
You know, before the non-smoking areas didn't even exist.
That's not good enough at all.
Well, no, I'm not saying
Not
it's
good enough, but
I'm
it's
not
a
saying
starting
it's
point.
good enough, but it's a step.
Right.
Before Olympic Games, there was a decision made to ask restaurants 3 stars and above, you know, good ones, to have a total ban on tobacco, total and smoking. Later, they changed to smoking sections and non-smoke sections, which happened in the States 15, 20 years ago. Because you're in the same room, the air circulates. Okay, this table is
They
smoking.
should be separated.
They should be in a closed space.
Right.
In Taiwan, you have to be in a closed space. You have to have ventilation. That expense is too excessive, so decided no smoking completely.
Right. So
Well, clearly this is a very hot issue.
It is very hard issue. We'll see what happens, what's going to happen next.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to take another short break. When we come back, more proposals. Welcome back to Crossover. Just now we've been talking about this smoking issue. Obviously, Gregory is very hot on that hot issue.
Yes, he's now smoking.
Let's just move on to the next proposal. It's a proposal being raised by one of the NPC deputies, one of the members of the legislature. It's more about the film industry, because these days we're actually seeing every day the scenes of either violence or smoking, maybe in the movies. So what basically this recommendation says is, you know, we should control the shots of violence in these movies, and at least we should block away all these, you know, scenes which are seen as inappropriate to the teenagers, to young people.
Now, does this mean to just take them out of the movies altogether?
Give them clarifications.
Or to institute a rating system?
Right.
Okay.
Well, they've been talking about this for years, but we don't see that happen actually, not in the Chinese movie industry. I don't know why.
Well, I mean, we've got a rating system in the States, you know, G, PG, PG-13, R, NC-17, and then I don't know what else. But I do remember watching a documentary once on how the rating system works in the United States. And I think it's kind of, if I remember correctly, it's kind of arbitrary. I mean, the panel that rates movies is not
scientific?
Yeah, not really. And some movies will be given this rating, and some movies will be given that rating, and it's a bit of a gray area as to just how they come up with the ratings that they come up with. You know, it's interesting.
Yeah, what I don't feel comfortable with, actually, with some of the scenes in the movies is basically you would see policemen in the movies talking on the phone while driving. Seatbelts not on, or smoking, and all violence, and all these scenes might not make people that comfortable. Correct. And if we want to, you know, implement that policy, at least you say, fasten your seatbelt when driving, and that is the correct message to be on.
I think to have a classification of movies is a good approach because in one way it's a sort of a recommendation to the audience. If you see a movie with this label as such, you should be careful not allow your kids to look at it. Nevertheless, when you have classifications, it's not clear cut because you have to have judges or readers to give them a grading. So they can do the best, but that's okay. Let the system in place first and make improvement later. I think that's helpful. Again, the covers mentioned not only violence, but also foul languages or unnecessary smoking sceneries as such. So that's a step toward the right direction. I would say that's something to be considered doing as quickly as possible. Why not? Why not?
Yeah, I guess this is an issue being discussed already for many years during in the film industry, and will be discussed even more. And we don't know what's going to happen next year.
Well, and Chinese film industry is growing rapidly.
It is.
So it could, you know, before maybe it wasn't as big an issue because China's film industry wasn't that, you know, flourishing. But now, you know, the number of films China produces in a year, blockbuster hits, you know, if not within China, then internationally or within Asia. You know, they've got a lot now. So it's time, you know, to have
one thing I'd like to see
system.
is not only the experts will look at the issue, thinking something has to be done, but we have to mobilize the silent majority. I mean, the people, the audience. For example, one of the reasons, I go back to smoking very quickly, because the smoking is prevalent in China, because non-smokers, they do not stand up to fight for their own rights. You know, you cannot smoke to harm my health. So the same is true. I think the Chinese people should take this issue to the hearts and say, this is a part of my business. I have to let my voice out. I think that would be helpful.
So they are the representatives, the public opinion. So it seems this is the starting point. Just for your information, how it works, and all these recommendations will be collected and be submitted to a special committee, and they will be having all these proposals of new recommendations evaluated, and then they will be shortlisted, and some of them will be made into like draft resolutions, and when they become a resolution, it's either regulations or law, it will be enforced. So we'll see what's going to happen in the coming years. Let's just move on to another new proposal, and this is more about its real estate industry, because you know China has introduced all these strict new policies to try to control the price of the housing industry. Basically, it's, you know, you are allowed only to buy one house if you're a local or two houses maybe if you're a local resident, and if you're a resident from other places, and then you will be allowed to buy one house at this place. For the second house, maybe you have to provide your tax invoices, tax records before you can buy anything.
Well,
and the new proposal says that policy should be loosened to be allowing people to buy houses which is, you know, larger than 140 square meters. Basically, that's a 3-bedroom house. They're saying, you know, the new policies are actually controlling people who are willing to buy, who want to buy houses smaller than that one, because these are what the major demand is about. And we're talking about the villas or those big houses, you're not targeting the right targets.
It is one of the very serious problems facing China today, because expenses in housing, medical expenses, education are the new 3 mountains, you know, burdened on the shoulders of the people in China. I think I watched the program this morning. Premier Wen Jiabao also dealt with the issue. So nowadays, the cost of this housing is much too high. It's beyond the reach of a newly graduate student to buy anything at all. Become a device for those rich to become richer. They have the second house, third house, using someone else's name to buy it. So this problem has to be handled extremely seriously to decide what to do next, because in the long run, things would go down the drain, maybe bubbles out and so on. That'd be extremely serious consequences. So it cannot be delayed any further. It has to be taken care of very seriously at this point. The government is ready to build like 10 million houses, whatever.
Low-rent houses?
For renting. That is important because the United States, you can subsidize to get a house $50 a month or so. I think how much you try to lower the cost of housing still beyond the reach of the general public. So rental, this discount is the way to go.
Maybe I'm thinking, because there is also one argument about these, bought but not